Hello and welcome to today's episode of Soul Sessions. I'm so excited to have the amazing Kayla Burch with me today, who is a business and mindset coach. And today we'll be talking all about mindset. But before we dive in, I'm just going to hand you over to Kayla directly just to let her introduce herself, first of all.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Jen. I'm excited to be here. So I am a business and mindset coach. I always like to say that the business is the sign on my door. That's what gets people in the door because that's what they think that they need. And once we get in there, we really start to dive deep into those inner workings of our mind, our subconscious, our behaviors that are holding us back. And that's when we can really start to make those shifts personally and professionally. So that's what I do for work. I'm also a mom to four. I homeschool my four babies. And so I have a lot of different things going on, a lot of different places, but I always like to encourage people that when you show up and you show up as yourself, you can thrive personally and professionally. And so those are just a few little highlights about me.
Amazing. And you also homeschooling your four kids. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yes.
Yep, you've got a lot on your plate just on that alone, I can imagine. So I guess
Yes.
especially when you're then running your own business as well, the mindset really comes in for that, doesn't it? Because I mean, generally, I guess juggling life and business on its own without like homeschooling and everything, that is usually enough already. So I get what's sort of mindset practices do you do and that support you in your business as well
Yeah.
as your personal life?
Yeah. So really it's a high level of awareness. So when you're really aware of your like your default behaviors and your thought patterns, then you can really make shifts with them. So that was my biggest key, is just being really aware and open and comfortable with going deep into what's holding me back, and also personal responsibility, not deflecting and making everything else the problem when I know that the only problem is here, right? And here. Like that's the only problem. And so those are the mindset practices that I do, and how I've applied them was, and I could give you kind of like a visual, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, Kayla, when I first started my business, I started as a health coach, and I was also homeschooling my children then. I've homeschooled for a long time. I've always homeschooled them. And so I made a lot of excuses. My kids would always be an excuse for me. They needed this. I needed to do that. Like I wasn't being all these different things to them. And so it was like this running dialogue in my head that I just wasn't showing up. And what it really was fear, because I knew if I did show up, then things would shift and change. So that mindset work of personal responsibility, and this is on me, these are things that I have to do. And I couldn't get my business going then. I'd gain a little bit of momentum and then I'd pull myself back, and I'd gain some momentum and then I'd pull myself back. And then now, after I've done all this deep inner work and shifted, now my business is thriving and so are my children, right? So I think those are a big contrast of how important it is to really show up in that way of personal responsibility and ownership with what goes on up in your mind.
Absolutely. I guess especially in the beginning sort of stages of a business, sometimes I guess you just sort of get lost, don't you? So thinking about like my listeners who potentially at the beginning, a lot of them actually in the beginning stages of the business, what can they do just sort of keep going and just keep positive? Because we all know like the beginning stages can be really, really hard, and there's a lot of like people just giving up because they're not seeing the results that they want to see as quickly, right? So
Absolutely.
what can you give them any sort of tips?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I always like to point out is that a huge piece of advice right now is look to the experts. Like, so when there are people are like, look to the experts, see what they're doing. I actually encourage you not to do that so much at the very beginning. And the reason is because when you look to the experts and you see what they're doing, what we do is we immediately go into imposter syndrome, right? And now we're trying to duplicate somebody else's business instead of truly trying to find our own. Right. So it doesn't mean never see what anybody else is doing, but don't try to duplicate them. Right. Not at the beginning. Right. Definitely not at the beginning. The most important thing you can do at the beginning of your business is really go in here. Right. And go in here and understand what it is you want. What are your values? What are your ticks? What are the things that are going to bring you fulfillment and joy and passion? And also understand what's holding you back from it. What are you scared of, right? What are the outcomes that you're worried about? What are the things that, and the mental and even physical barriers that are in your way? Focus on that at the beginning and start to make some momentum and traction there. And then things will fall into place outside of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've actually spoken to my husband about this yesterday. And I was saying that a lot of people within their first year look at sort of people in business that have been there for 10 years and then compare themselves as well, because that is a really huge thing. That's what I had to overcome that fairly quickly. I was like, why is XYZ not working for me? Because it's working for them. Well, yeah, because they've been doing business for God knows how much longer than I have. So obviously,
Exactly.
but as you say, it's the awareness piece around that. You know, I've done lots of like different mindset things. So I'm quite aware generally. So I know that, but I also know a lot of people that they're just not aware about that. So and they have to sort of sit down. And yeah, we were saying that this is like one of, when I compare myself to someone that's been there for 5 or 10 years, of course that makes me want to quit like my business and just like give up, because it's not, it's just I then ask myself, why are they have a 7-figure business, whatever, and I can't sign my first client, or whatever the struggle may be. Obviously, you just get completely deflated. But yeah, as you said, it's really good, just tune into yourself and see what is for you that you also want to create, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't really sell an offer, whatever business that may be, that you're not 100% behind, right? So
Right.
if it doesn't excite you, no one else is going to get excited about it. Let's face it. So it's
Exactly.
really starting, I guess, if you're struggling at the moment, just to be aware what's going on, and just, as you say, do you, with mindset generally, do you do like a lot of journaling as well, or do you get your client to journal, or what do you tend to do?
No, I don't lean into journaling as much. It just depends on the client, honestly. If they feel
Yeah.
like that's something that they need, and I will say that's
Yeah.
usually a big default, is people think that the journaling is really going to be the thing that unlocks them. But what I find a lot of times with clients when they start to journal, it actually is detrimental at
Mm.
the beginning, because
Yeah.
what happens is they get really confused on what they want to journal. They don't feel good about themselves yet. And so now it feels forced. Now it feels like
Yeah.
something that they have to do, and they're not connected to it. And so what I really start with clients, and what I encourage them to do first and foremost, is just start to repeat things to yourself, right? You can write them down if they feel
Mm.
really good, or if you want them to start feeling really good, you can write them down. But I've seen a lot of people at the very beginning become really disconnected from journaling because of that very reason, because it
Yeah.
just doesn't resonate yet and it feels so fake. And so, it's a lot of just, how can we speak this into existence? And
Mm.
then how can we identify in the moment that it doesn't feel in alignment with who you are today? And so a lot of what I do is a lot more of like the speaking and then the
Yeah.
reframing, and speaking and then reframing. And then we can begin to write that down if it feels comfortable. But I have some clients who start to journal and they love it, right? So it's just
Yeah.
completely
It's
dependent on the client itself. Yeah.
no, absolutely. I mean, as you say, some people that they might already be journaling, and it's going to be really easy for them, whereas others, as you said, that there might be a lot of resistance, and it's never good, regardless of if it's business or not. It's never good to work with that much resistance. If it's just like a
Right.
hell no, just like, why
Mhm.
do just look at why there is a resistance in the first place, rather than like just doing it. So yeah.
Exactly. Right. And that's what we dive into, is that resistance. I love that you bring that up. What we have to dive into, why you're resistant in the first place, or you're just going
Yeah.
to keep doing the same things. Those behaviors are never going to change. Those thoughts are never going to change, because that resistance is still going to be there blocking you.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I do have that with some of my clients. It's like you can feel when you're talking to someone, you can feel the resistance come up as well, can't you? It's just like, okay, so why are you resisting this? What is going on here? So,
Yes.
but yeah, I think when a lot of people as well, when I sort of hear a business coach, as you say, They just like want the business side of things, but they don't realize actually that, I mean, me as well as a coach, I do work with mindset as well, because you can't do, in my opinion, you can't do one without the other, really.
Mhm.
You need to work on your mindset, don't you? So are there some like general patterns or behaviors from sort of entrepreneurs, or I guess general people, not necessarily entrepreneurs, um, that you found that limit them from reaching their like full
Yeah.
potential?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I find the most, and entrepreneurs, that's who I work with, right? Female entrepreneurs. And so it is one of those things that we are very critical of ourselves, especially at the very beginning, right? We really fear judgment from others, right? Because we're so busy judging ourselves, right? So we can get into that as well. We're so worried about outcome at the very beginning, right? This has to work. But then also, oh my God, what if it does work? Right? So you have both of those. What if it doesn't work out? And then what if it does? Right? And so we live in this fear of outcome. And so that paralyzes us, and huge not feeling like we're worth it. Right? So our self-worth, our confidence is really low, because along the way and things and stories we've told ourselves up until this point has proven to us that we're not worth success, or we're not worth a certain amount of money, or all of these different things. That's what we've now justified in our life. And so now we're repeating it in our business. So I would
Yeah.
say those are the top three that I really find are just generic, right? Everyone has them. You are not unique for it. Like everyone is dealing with it. It's just, I always say, same package, different form, right? Same package, different form. Everyone's
Yeah.
coming with the same thing. It's just coming from a different form. And so it's a really powerful concept when you start to break those three things down.
I guess, is there anything, if, the entrepreneur is now feeling like, the outcome not worthy, etc., is there anything that could do, I'm not going to say a quick fix, because I know there is no quick fix, but is there something that they could do right now that could help them with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these actually are quick fixes. You can feel almost an immediate like shift when you lean into it. And then it just takes
Yeah.
a repetitive like changes afterwards. But one of the biggest things, especially for like fear of judgment, is I always like to say, and this saying, nobody cares about you as much as you think. I always
Yeah.
just like to say, nobody cares about you, right? I'm just going to leave it at that. Like nobody cares
Yeah.
about you. And I mean that in the most loving way, but it's really true. Then I always like to add in there, nobody cares about you. They only care about what they see in themselves and what it does for them, right? And so we're all mirrors to each other, right? I'm a mirror to you, you're a mirror to me. So anything that makes us uncomfortable or critical in somebody else, there's a reason for it,
Yeah.
because we're either critical for it in ourselves or we want it for ourselves, right? So anytime somebody has a criticism against you, it's actually not about you and it's totally about them. It's so I always like to say it because people are like, no, that I don't feel like that's true. So one of the things I hear a lot is I'm too much, right? Or I don't want to be too much, right? That's what clients say a lot. I don't want to be too much. So it's like if somebody criticizes you for being too much, they're either too afraid to speak up for themselves, they're too afraid to put themselves out there, or the opposite of that, they too have felt like they've been too much and they
Yeah.
see that as a danger within you, and they're like, hey, calm down, right? You're going to get dinged for being this. So either way, it's actually not a reflection about you, it's about them. And the more we can set into that, and the more we can
Mm.
recognize that when we show up in our true self, our true identity, our true values, our true being, then how somebody else receives that is not our responsibility, right? Okay, so we have that acknowledgement, like, hey, this is about them. But then it's also where are you judging yourself? Why are you judging yourself for being too much, right? What are those feelings that come up whenever you get on camera and you're there and you're present and you're the center, and then all of a sudden you contract, right? You've allowed yourself to expand and then you contract. Now it comes to asking yourself why, right? What are the dangers, perceived dangers for you for
Yeah.
being in that situation? And then you can start to understand why that's your default. And then you can quickly change it, right? That's the power of it. When you get to some of these techniques and these different ideas, you can
Mm.
quickly change his behaviors, and you could show up really confident the next day on camera. right? And it's really powerful frameworks, just awareness, right? That's why I love
Yeah.
just to work with awareness, is because the more we're aware, the more shifts we have in our actions.
Well, no, exactly. I mean, I mean, there was like, we all scroll the internet as much as we don't want to, but we all do. And, you do come across things that will almost trigger you. And every time when I see something that sort of triggers me or doesn't, I'm just like, why? I'm not really a confrontational person anyway, so I would never go to someone else's profile and like send them a message and say, I don't know, whatever. But instead, I'm literally just looking at just like, so why am I reacting? What is actually coming up for me? And as you say, the awareness piece is so huge with everything. And it's also, I guess, if something triggers you, not to react like straight away.
Yeah.
Um, I mean that is not just like social media or whatever. I do that actually in life, just general. Even if my husband or my daughter does something, it's like, no, just walk away for even if it's just for a minute or so, and then come back and it just
Yes.
But because if you react straight away, there is so much like emotions behind it, which a lot of times is probably not that great. So because
Yeah.
you've triggered, you've reacted to something. So, but yeah. Um, so are there any like daily mindset practices that I, for example, could do for my business?
So you broke up. Sorry about that. My internet
Sorry,
kind
no,
of
that's
cut
fine.
out there. So yeah, any daily mindset practices that what?
I could do, for example, in my business or any other entrepreneur.
Yeah. So since my big focus is on awareness, I like to call things filters. So I always ask people to set up filters in their life for their triggers, right? So when you're triggered, so if you're very responsive or reactive to a certain person or a situation, then it's setting up a filter in which you run your thoughts through, right? So you do that filter, you create that filter when you're feeling good, right? When you're
Yeah.
feeling clear-headed, right? And prior to, and you start to realize this is how I want to act. This is how I default. This is how I feel when I'm defaulting to the place that I don't want to be. And this is
Mm.
how I can shift it, recognize it, and change it. And so you set these filters up and then you feel that trigger. And the more you do it, the easier it comes, right? At the beginning, it's
Yeah.
not so easy. And then you're 2 hours later and you're like, oh yeah. Right. But then it was 2 hours instead of 6 hours. Right.
Yeah.
And then it just gets smaller. And now you're in the moment and you're saying, there it is. There's my trigger. Now,
Yeah.
how do I want to be? How do I want to react in this? And there's also a lot of other really reminding yourself to lean into some perspective shifts. So whenever you
Mm.
change your perspective on something and you have a different idea and a different mindset, I do encourage you to write that down and read it, right? So if you say, this is what I think now, right? This is
Yeah.
what I think now. This is what I did think then. You can do that.
Mm.
Like, so I think this instead of this. That also helps us move into that new train of thought, that new mindset.
Amazing. There's definitely something I really like the filter one.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good one. I guess especially as entrepreneurs, where we have to sort of learn to deal with a load of different things. Um, do you have some top 3 tips when it comes to mindset and mindset work?
Oh goodness. Yeah. Let's see. What would my top 3 tips be? Personal responsibility is number one, right? You can't do this work unless you feel personally responsible and
Yeah,
you're able to own your own baggage, right?
yeah,
Number one, this is all on you, right? You create your own
yeah,
reality. People hate when I say that, but everything that you're experiencing right now is created from your brain, right? It just
yeah.
is what it is. And so you have the power to change that. So personal responsibility has to be number one. The willingness to be uncomfortable, right? Do deep work, get a little bit uncomfortable, uncover some things that maybe aren't ideal for you, which is going to lead right back to number one, personal responsibility. They're yours. They're there for a reason. So deal with them. So the willingness to be uncomfortable. And then what would number three be? Commitment, just commitment to yourself, right? So if we're going to change our mindset, we have to go through those three phases. We have to, right? We have to be willing. We have to be committed. We have to be personally responsible to make the changes that are now brought into our awareness. Because having things in your awareness, the problem with when people aren't committed is they dig things up, they become aware, and then they don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Right. Over time, we can make those shifts. But then if we still feel victim to our life, then we're just victim to that awareness where it's, oh my gosh, of course this is happening again. I always do this. It's in my stars. It's this, it's that, it's this, right? I can't change it. It's like, no, you're personally responsible, right? There's a lot of things in my stars that are set up against me, a lot, right? But I'm personally responsible for recognizing my default patterns, right? Good or bad. And changing them if I want to, or getting support in the places that I can't change. There's some things that I can't change, so I have to get the support in it. And so that's all personal responsibility, right? That's me recognizing if I want something to change, I have to do it. Nobody else is going to do it for me.
Absolutely, getting out of that victim mode, isn't there? That
Yes.
We've all been in it, and I've been in it, and I'm, luckily I'm not. I don't think I do it. No, I'm not. I'm done with that. So I'm aware of that. I'm just like, okay, no, switch it around. But those are some really, really amazing tips. So thank you very much for that. Do you before I'm just gonna wrap this up? Do you want to add anything else that you haven't quite added yet? That's not that's not me putting you on the spot. It's just asking if there's anything else that you would want to share.
Yes. One thing that is keep coming into my mind a couple of times in this conversation is, and this goes back to that fear of judgment. And I heard this once from Michael Singer, and Michael Singer was talking about, everybody's right. So nobody can be wrong, right? And when you break it down, it's true. Nobody can be wrong because everyone comes from their own set of experiences. So how can they be wrong? Like, that's their right. You may not agree with it. It may not be your right, right? It may not be something that even you condone. However, their experience is still right. So their opinion, their thoughts, their actions, their behaviors, it's all right, even if it's set up against you. And so the more we recognize that, hey, I'm right and you're right, I'm no more right than you, then we don't try to prove that we are, right? And we don't feel, and we don't set into this existence of needing to be right, or needing to be superior, or needing to change somebody else's mind, right? That's a big one. That goes back to the judgment, is that we constantly are trying to change somebody else's mind about us, right? Like, how can I get you to see me differently, instead of just thinking, you're right, you don't like me, or right, you're right, you think I'm too much. Like, that's okay, because that's coming from your set of your existence. And so that's another perspective shift and another different framework for us to view ourselves and the world around us, which then makes it easier for us to change our mindset.
Amazing. Yeah. I've not actually heard of that before, but yes, you're right. And to me, it absolutely makes perfect sense as well, because it's just, as you said, we all have our own backgrounds. So, what is, true for me, it's not necessarily true for you, but it doesn't mean that it hasn't happened, or it's not right, or, so that's a nice one to actually, that's a really nice one actually to finish up on. That's a really good tip and sort of thing to, I guess, for all of us to think about, because, as you said, we're all right. We're all, So thank you very much, Kayla, for joining me today. I'm going to put all of your details in the show notes today, so that anyone who wants to get in touch with you can do that directly. But for now, thank you so much for joining me. It was such lovely talking to you, and especially as it's now 6 o'clock your time, AM. Yes, is it 6?
Yes, 6 a.m. Yes.
So thank you
Thank
very
you so
much
much
for
for having me.
the early get up. And yeah, as I say, I'll put everything in the show notes. If anyone wants to get in touch with Kayla directly. Do you have a lovely day, and for my listeners and watchers, also have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.